Hi, dear students in Nursing Theories, Nursing 6010. I wanted to try retaping this. I first want to apologize a little bit for some of the technological glitches that I've had. I've had a sick relative and have been out of town a fair amount trying to do things from a distance, and it's proven to be a little bit of a challenge, so please forgive me. I want to talk a little bit about a few of the things that we've done so far in the class, and a little bit about what we have left. And of course, feel free to always email me. I try to respond promptly, and I don't mind you bugging me if I don't get back to you quickly on your emails. First off, I hope you enjoyed the Caring Theorist one. That was probably the most interesting and provocative in terms of listening to or looking at some of your posts, etc., regarding caring for others and self-care. And it was really provided a lot of insight, and I hope it was provided a good opportunity for many of you to do some self-reflection, because I think it's tough for many of us to apply some of the theories to ourselves in a way that we would apply it to patients. The Caring Theorists, trumpeted really by Watson, Leininger, and Martinson, who are the big three caring grand theorists that are out there. And then we looked, of course, at some of the mid-range theories that have evolved off of Gene Watson's work. I do want to just point out to you that the mid-range theories that have been developed, Duffy and Smith, etc., are all deductive models, with the exception of Kristen Swanson. Her work regarding grief and miscarrying, etc., was developed from an inductive model. So she had this worldview, this philosophy that was consistent with Gene Watson, because remember, Gene Watson is both a philosophy and has a grand theory, and then she's also developed caring theory, mid-range theory, off of her own work. But Swanson, who was very well schooled, because she studied here in Colorado, very well schooled in Watson's work, and came from that philosophical bent, then developed her work inductively as she worked with women who had experienced spontaneous abortion or miscarried. So that's typical of mid-range theory, is that they are deductive in development. Another one we haven't looked at as much, but would be another example would be Martha Rogers' work. Now remember, Martha was the first grand theorist, first theorist in general in nursing, who said nursing is a science. It's not just an art. It is its own field of study, and we have our own body of knowledge to develop. There are also many theories that have been developed off of her work. And Pamela Reed's work that you've read about is one. And then there are several other works, Elizabeth Barrett and Dorothea Wood, and there's some others that have developed mid-range theory off of, based on her grand theory. Remember, when you think about theory, that it has specific function. And each theory will have at least one function. And that function is either to describe something in particular, like to describe the process of grief, or it is to explain something, explain how the cervix ripens in preparation for labor, explain. It may be to predict something. If I look at Nola Pender's work, and she basically says, she has a health promotion model, she says that if you do X, Y, and Z, you'll get this health promotion outcome. So that has a predictive. And then there's, of course, prescribing function for theory. So those would be the primary functionality of different models. As an advanced practice nurse, you're going to need to be skilled in a couple of things. One is to sit down and take a real look at a given theory and ask yourself, what can it do for me in practice? And I want to stress to you that there is no magic bullet. There is no magic answer for using theory. Some of you posted just really nice posts talking about you really liked a particular theorist, that it seemed to resonate with you. It had helped it when you read it, it made sense to you in terms of how things happened. And that can be as sound a reason as any for why you might use a particular theory to guide practice, to help explain what you do in your advanced practice, etc. If you do select a given theory and you like how it sounds and it fits with how you see the world, then the only second thing that you have to ask yourself in using the theory is evaluating it. And this is particularly important for mid-range theory. So where you're looking at using theory that is more circumscribed. It's not the big grand one that applies to everybody, but it's mid-range that applies to people with pain or children with developmental delays or cognition in the elderly, dementia, whatever. But when you evaluate those theories, and you're asking yourself, is this a useful theory to use? You're going to use some criteria. In this class, we're looking at Chin and Jacobs. And Chin and Jacobs have 5 pieces that you all have looked at as part of your postings. And whichever theory you select to use, you need to ask yourself, is it relatively simple? Is it clear? When I look at this theory, does it have relative clarity? I can follow it. It makes sense. Is it generalizable to the population that it's attempting to address, such as people with pain? Is it accessible? And lastly, does it have importance? Does it mean something in terms of what nursing looks to uncover or study? And I also want to tell you that when you're evaluating, you have to develop confidence, and this will be important when it comes to your comp exams. You have to have confidence that your evaluation of a given theory is as good as mine, or is as good as any other faculty member or any other clinician. But you have to make a determination and have a rationale for it. And that will become important, as I said, when you do your own comp. So when you present a theorist as part of your comp work, you're going to say that in evaluating this theory, it is simple, it is clear, etc., etc. And that is your judgment. And then you need to be able to back that up with specific examples should you be asked. Okay. Lastly, I want to encourage you to think carefully, and particularly when it comes to your slide presentation, about the components of theory. Theories are put together. Any one of you could develop your own theory, and that would be just as valid as myself or Watson or anybody else developing one. And all theories have components. Theories will identify key select concepts. They'll talk about how those concepts interrelate. All theories have assumptions. We've talked about this before in the class, that you have to buy into certain beliefs to use a given theory. And so those assumptions are of more current theories are laid out by the theorists. If you go back and read their work, they will tell you what the assumptions are for the model. The older folks, Hildegard Peplau, Travelby, etc., they didn't do that. But the newer ones all have. So you want to ask yourself, what are the assumptions? Do they make sense? And then the axioms and the theorems. Axiom and theorems are statements of relationships between concepts, and the theorems are the ones we test. The axioms are the ones that we assume to be true. So they're statements of relationship. I also want to mention a little bit about borrowed theory. Excuse me. There's much discourse in the field of nursing about the acceptability of using borrowed theory. I would say that most nurse educators, nurse clinicians believe that using borrowed theory is perfectly fine. So if somebody in medicine, physical therapy, sociology, some other field has developed a theory, and that theory makes sense, it's clear, it helps explain something, that it's perfectly acceptable to use it in nursing. There are some in nursing who think that's not correct. I had an interesting dialogue with Dr. Watson this past summer, or excuse me, this past spring when I was in South Africa, and she was also there. We were talking about the use of theory. And she feels very strongly that we have to be using nursing theory if we're going to actually grow the discipline. Otherwise, what are we doing in terms of developing nursing knowledge? So I don't know that I 100% agree with that. I do think that if you're going to borrow a theory, you have an obligation to say, how does it fit with nursing? How does it fit with our meta-paradigm concepts? So if I'm borrowing motivational interviewing or Prochaska, any of those works, Erickson, whoever, then how does it relate to nursing, what I'm supposed to do as a nurse? How does it relate to how we define health? How does it relate to how we define humans? Those become important when you're borrowing from another field that has context within nursing. So think about that a little bit. The other thing that I think is useful is when you're developing your comp exam presentation, or you're writing a paper, or you're looking at your clinical practice, ask yourself, what are people using in the field? When you read articles related to pain or informatics or dementia or whatever it might be, ask yourself, when you read articles, what theories are popping up? And typically people are using those theories for a variety of reasons, but one is probably they make sense in terms of explaining the phenomenon of concern, like pain or grief or whatever. Now, you may want to try something different and new and say that it would explain it in a different and better way. The other theories have not done a good job in explaining it or describing something, and that's okay. But that often is a good starting place for you to consider. Okay, last thing I want to comment on, and then we'll talk about the slide presentation and the quizzes, is that it's often mentioned that we need one big theory in nursing. And I think I've mentioned this before, is that the notion that if all of us just bought into Roger's work or Roy's work or Newman's work or whoever, that couldn't we just all get along? Couldn't we just all play in the sandbox and use the same person and this nuttiness with different theories? But I would ask you to think back on Kuhn's work. We talked about paradigms and pushing new knowledge and helping to explain things that we haven't been able to explain before. And while it seems convenient to use one, that one is probably not sufficient. So that there's one that's popular at any given time, but that as we gain new knowledge, that one that we've been using probably doesn't explain things well, and we have to burst forth with a new model or adapt that model in new ways so that it's useful for practice. Okay, our next module will open on July 14th, Monday, and it will close at the end of the semester. And we're almost done, so not too much time left. But this last module is going to focus on thinking a little bit, how could you use some of these models in practice? So there'll be some articles to read showing how, for example, Levine's work could be used with the elderly. If you as a DNP or Master's Prepared Clinician were looking at applying it in that population. We'll look at Betty Newman's work. How could that be applied? So we'll look at some examples that you might find useful. I also have emailed a couple of my other students asking if I might post their comp slide presentation into the course so that you could see how the theory might be incorporated. And so if one of the students agrees to that, I will be posting that, but I probably won't know that till Tuesday or Wednesday because I just emailed students a few days ago. Quiz number 2, I messed up. I beg your forgiveness that I thought it was open and I was on the road and it wasn't. So I'm going to leave that quiz up and open until July 22nd at midnight. And if anybody has any concerns about that, let me know. It's probably to your advantage to take it sooner rather than later. You still get 2 attempts, and we'll take the best score. But please let me know if that's a problem. Otherwise, you have to July 22nd. Quiz number 3 will open July 17th, this coming Thursday, and it will be open through July 25th, which is a Friday. And then lastly, the slide presentation. The slide presentation is due July 28th. And I want to talk a little bit about that presentation. I want to encourage you to look at the criteria in the syllabus and make sure that your 20 slides, you're limited to 20. I won't look at any more slides than 20. And that 20 slides includes the title page and the references. What's in between, you're going to take one theorist. It could be a borrowed theorist. If it's a borrowed theorist, make sure that it's clear how it fits with nursing. When you do your slide presentation, you are welcome to put some notes on the bottom of the slide, the PowerPoint presentation. You can put some bulleted notes down there. That's totally fine. You can audio narrate. I'll give you some extra points for that. You cannot get more than 100% for the slide presentation. But let's suppose you would normally get a score of 90 on it. If you audio narrate it, it would bump it back up to 95. But nobody gets more than 100 points. It's just that if you've lost points, you can gain those back with audio narration. You don't have to do that if you're struggling with it. That's totally fine. So you need to select the theorist. Just selecting and identifying the theorist will get you 5%. You need to have 1 or 2 slides that provides an overview of the theorist. That may be things like where the person was born, where they went to school, some of their major professional achievements, maybe some salient points about life experiences or family background that would help give context to how they developed this work. Then 25%, a quarter of your grade for this, is on describing the philosophical underpinnings of the theory. So about a fourth of the slides, 3 or 4 or 5, should deal with philosophical assumptions, etc. So I would suggest you have a slide that would identify the major concepts and maybe a brief definition. You don't have to do every concept from the theory, but maybe the major concepts. Identify how many assumptions there might be. You could say this theory has 8 assumptions. You might be able to list them, and if there's too many, you might just say there's 15 assumptions. Half of these deal with X and the other half with Y. You could do something like that. And I would suggest in this criterion about describing the philosophical underpinnings that you look at including a slide that shows the theoretical model of the theory. Remember, a model is only a picture of a theory. So you take the concepts that you're looking at and reading about and you put them into a picture format. Pain relates to, stressors relates to, whatever. And for many of these theories, there's already pictures that are out there. As long as you reference, that's adequate. But I would suggest you consider putting a theoretical model. And if you audio narrate, you can just talk a little bit about it or put a few points at the bottom of the slide. Another 25% of the slide presentation is describing how the theory has been used. So you want 2 or 3 slides that will talk about where has the theory been used? Has it been used in clinical practice? Has it been used in nursing education, in nursing programs? Is there research out there that has actually used this theory, or is it pretty much fizzled out and there hasn't been much? How about in clinical practice, admin, other areas? So you want to talk a little bit about how it's been used in practice. Maybe there are some particular instruments that have been developed based on that theory, and that those are widely used in clinical practice, like Cheryl Titano-Beck developed a depression scale out of her work, and that's widely used, so you might mention something like that. But anyway, I want the sense of and description of how it's been used in practice. You could also look at going to the literature, and on your slide you could put, when you Google Titano-Beck's work, there are, I'm making this up, 64 articles that appear in PubMed. Review of these articles reflects that about a third of them relate to use of this in clinical practice. Another third demonstrate research that is or has been done related to the model, and the rest relate to use of nursing education. So I'm making that up, but that would give the reader or the person viewing it some context about how this theory has been used. You might look and see whether it's been used in advanced practice. What kinds of settings has it been used in? Has a given theory been used only in public health or only in nursing home settings? Or has it been used in a wide variety of settings, from pediatric to elderly to community to inpatient? Give us some sense of how it's been used. The next criterion is recommendation of references related to the theory. So there should be some slide that I want to know when you look at the literature. I want you to recommend one or two articles, maybe there's a videotape, maybe a YouTube, maybe a whatever, that you think really capture and show how this theory could really be used relative to advanced practice. And then lastly, you're going to have references. Probably one slide is sufficient. You could do two, but probably one is sufficient. I just want the key references. You can also reference on each slide if you have material there, like a picture or whatnot. You can reference on each slide. And then at the very end, you can put some general references. Now, lastly, there's a criterion for clarity and creativity in presentation. I would encourage you, when you do slide presentations, you want to use the power of visual media to engage the viewer. So pictures of the theorist, pictures of practice settings, where it might be used. I'd encourage you to think about those visual graphics that you can include, and of course you reference those appropriately from a copyright standpoint, but that will be important to help garner and engage the viewer. Okay, so I hope that gives you a little bit of help and some guidance in terms of the slide presentation. I have to look, and I can't do it right now because the tape here is rolling, but I will look and see, and I will put something in the current syllabus about when the slide presentation will open for posting. I always hate to have people post too early, because once you post, then we're done. And I'd rather have people ask for a little bit of an extension than to post, pull it out, post again. It's difficult. So make sure when you're ready, it's ready to go. I will put in the syllabus tonight yet when the PowerPoint slide presentations can first be uploaded, and then of course they need to be in by July 28th at midnight. Okay, so I hope that helps. We may not have another video from me. I may just do more of it using emails back and forth or announcements. But if there's something that seems particularly pressing and unclear, then I'll post another video. So, okay, thank you. I hope your summer's going well. And I look forward with great enthusiasm to seeing your postings because they've been really awesome. So I thank you, and everybody